Just a quick word to say the Scotland Rugby podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English for everything you need to know about the world of Scottish rugby. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby podcast.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello there and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast on September the 1st, 2023. Top billing for me, David Currie and Rory Loy, has to be the European draws after a sobering week for Scottish clubs in continental competition. We'll also be thinking out loud about the weekend's big games. Well, Rory will. I'll just be asking the questions, maybe touching on transfer talk too. So we've got a lot to cover, Rory. Let's crack on. The group stage draws have been made, so we'll start off with this one. Rory, what do you reckon to Rangers' Europa League prospects? They're the top seeds in the group, alongside Real Betis, Sparta Prague and Aris Limassol, who incidentally just beat Slovan Bratislava by a whopping 7-3 on aggregate.
I think it's doable in terms of qualification. I don't see why not. I'm guilty of as well, Rangers have almost an association with the Europa League because of that fantastic run a couple of years ago, and you tend to think that they're capable of pulling off big results in Europe, but they certainly didn't do that last year in the group stages after a good qualification campaign. They really, really struggled in the Champions League group stage. You just can't get away from that. However, looking at that group, I think if you're looking at Limassol, you would expect them to finish above Limassol, in my opinion. Real Betis, Celtic played them a couple of years ago. Real Betis, from what I know and understand, they like to play attacking football. They've got goals in them. I think Rangers are capable of taking points off Betis. So, listen, it's not going to be easy for Rangers because no games are in Europe. But I think finishing second is an achievable target. I really do.
So, the Rangers have a couple of seasons ago when they got to the final. I mean, what kind of qualitative gap is there between that Rangers side and the one that you're seeing just now?
In my opinion, quality in the final third is big now. Rangers did concede goals in Europe, but they were always able to score enough goals to get through the ties. And I think if you look back at that run, towards the end of that run, they were actually playing with no striker at all. However, they managed to score goals, and the quality in the final areas was good. Kent scored a few good goals in Europe that year. Morelos as well the previous year, and the start of that campaign was good, scoring goals. I think at this moment in time the jury's out on the attacking players. You look at Dessers, you look at Sima, Lammers. I don't think anyone's particularly convinced. So I think in Europe you've got to take your chances when they come along, and Rangers were excellent at doing that a couple of years ago. So I think between now and the group stage campaign starting, you're going to have a better picture of how good these players can be if they're up to the task. But, if they don't turn up on the European stage, in my opinion, Rangers will concede goals. And at this moment in time, it doesn't look particularly like they can score enough goals to give it a go. However, if these players can hit a bit of form and that can change, then my opinion is that's the biggest difference between the two sides at the moment is attacking threat and intent.
Finally, in this one, Rory, Michael Beale says the PSV game came too early, but funnily enough, qualifiers seem to come at the same time every year. But will they be ready? Will they be ready for the group stage? Because it's not that long till it kicks off.
Well, if there was to be no incomings, outgoings at Rangers, then, if you're asking me that now, and it's obviously difficult, but if the group stages were to start tomorrow, I would say no. I really would. I don't think there's cohesion there. The one thing I think I've struggled to understand is, I watched Rangers and Michael Beale was lauded as being the brains behind the operation under Gerrard. I don't really see too much tactical nous at the moment. There was no plan B against Kilmarnock, for example. I think against PSV, they just kind of accepted defeat and didn't really look like they had a clear way of playing, a clear message on the pitch. So I think Michael Beale needs to, first of all, decide how he wants to play, drill that message home, and try and give the same 11 a few starts back to back rather than chopping and changing all the time, because at this moment in time nobody's pulling up trees. So there's got to be a little bit of consistency in selection to allow these players to try and settle into the team. But at this moment in time I would say no, but a lot can change. A week's a long time in football, as they say, DC, so a few weeks is even longer. So we'll see come the group stage campaign, but if you were to ask me right now, I would say no. However, I think if they can get it together, like I say, they have the capabilities to finish second if they can get things right.
Right, let's talk about Aberdeen. They found out who they'll be playing in the Conference League, and it's a challenging draw for them, don't you think? Rory, exciting, aye, but challenging. Eintracht Frankfurt, who we're aware of, beat Rangers in the Europa League final season before last from the Bundesliga. PAOK, Slayers of Hearts in the playoff round, and HJK Helsinki.
Yes, indeed. I mean, touching on PAOK straight away, I mean, at this moment in time, is there a great deal of difference between Hearts and Aberdeen in terms of squad, ambition? If they were to play each other tomorrow, could you pick a winner? Probably not. It would be a pretty close, tight game. And Hearts were on the end of a 6-1 thumping over 2 legs. So that kind of takes care of itself in terms of how difficult it's going to be for Aberdeen. Barry Robson will maybe be able to look back in that tie against Hearts and take some little nuggets from it to try and get a better result out of it. But I expect PAOK to do really well in the group, I must say. As for Frankfurt, Champions League, last season competed. They'll have a core squad who are very much used to European competition. They've got players in the squad that have obviously won the Europa League. They're going to be a very, very difficult opponent. And, Helsinki's a little bit of an unknown. But, as I've seen over in Häcken in Sweden when Aberdeen went over there, no game's easy. I think it's going to be a big, big ask for Aberdeen to qualify. What I think they'll want to do, though, is give a good account of themselves. And I do believe that having played Häcken, having played these teams moving forward, if Barry Robson can get them into a position where they finish third again, then as a squad of players and as a manager, that experience will be absolutely priceless come next year, because I do believe that when you're thrown into these ties and you're new to it all, it's quite difficult to adapt to. So, difficult group. I think they'll struggle to get through it, I'll be honest, but hopefully it stands them in good stead.
And they just don't look. I was at the St Mirren Aberdeen game on Sunday, and they just don't, whether they were tired or not, they just don't look to have gelled or kind of found a sense of identity yet. Is that just with all the new bodies coming in, do you think?
Yes, I think they've shown it in flashes. Over in Sweden for 35 minutes, they were excellent, really, really good. When they scored last night to make it 2-1, I thought there was a 10-15 minute spell where they were excellent. I think if Miovski tucks that one away, huge opportunity, and you'd back him every day of the week to score it, I think there's potential for a different outcome. Barry Robson last night wanted Aberdeen to squeeze the game, and he basically said to his 3 defenders, I'm going to leave you one-on-one, which at times, at that level of football, it can leave you quite vulnerable. They get turned a few times, and obviously they conceded goals on the back of that. However, I think, unlike Rangers, where other than, they beat Livingston 4-0, but for 75 minutes, I was at that game, they weren't particularly convincing. I don't think you've seen too many flashes other than the Ross County game. With Aberdeen, I think I have seen moments in games where you're thinking, I can see what they're trying to do there and it works, but it's just doing it on a consistent basis. I think Nicky Devlin needs to play right wing back. I said that last night. I know that Morris, who did play there, had an impact on the game, but I think they're taking a lot away from Nicky Devlin's game and the team by playing him at right centre back. I don't think it's natural to him. So I think a few tweaks here and there. They're going to bring a couple more bodies in, as far as I understand. I think that you'll see a better Aberdeen as the weeks go on. I really like Barry Robson, I must say. I like the way he speaks. I like the way he handles himself. And, I think Aberdeen will have a good season if they can manage the European campaign and marry it up with the league.
Right, then on to the biggest show of the lot, the Champions League. Last night, Celtic were drawn against Atletico Madrid, who they've played a few times without winning. Feyenoord, maybe a wee chance to get revenge for the 1970 European Cup final there. And Lazio, who Celtic beat home and away 4 years ago. The really big beasts, Rory, have been avoided, but still looks tough.
Well, you're not going to come out of that draw and think otherwise, regardless of the draw you get, because ultimately on paper, you look at the elites of Europe and you could look and say, well, they avoided the elites of Europe. Atletico Madrid finished third in La Liga last year. Lazio finished second behind Napoli. Quite a distance off Napoli, right enough, but they did finish second. Feyenoord are Dutch champions. So whilst on paper you may look at that and say, well, we don't have a Bayern Munich, we don't have an AC Milan, we don't have a Real Madrid, a Barcelona. I think it would be foolish to underestimate the quality of these sides. I think there was a little bit of that last year with Napoli. I think people looked at that group, looked at that group and thought, my goodness, Liverpool are a good side, and kind of dismissed Napoli to an extent as to how good they were. And I think Brendan Rodgers will be making sure that that's not the case for Celtic, because these sides had very, very good campaigns last year, hence the reason they're in this competition, in very competitive leagues. And whilst you may look at it and go, it could have been worse, I think it's going to be a tough ask. I think third, if Celtic can grab third, I think that would be a success in that group. I really do.
I mean, last season, the group stage, what was it? A couple of points they got. Really disappointing last season. Very formidable in the domestic scene, but the step up to Europe just seemed to be maybe too much to ask for them last season. And this season, it's been a patchy, to say the least, start for them.
Yeah, it has. I know Brendan Rodgers had a similar start when he went to Lincoln Red Imps, I think it was, in his first spell, and had a poor result. Look, I think that Brendan Rodgers will get it right at some point. He will get it right. It is early days. The problem he's got, in my opinion, is it looks like radical change in his approach. Now, I would have loved to see how Ange Postecoglou's side, in terms of the way they play, would have got on this year, because they did have large spells in matches, including against Real Madrid at home, where they were pretty unlucky. So it would have been interesting to see how he approached it if he was still there. However, it is Rodgers. I think he'll be far more pragmatic than Ange Postecoglou was. He has
mind you, it wasn't really the last time he was in Europe with Celtic, was he? To be fair,
he was more pragmatic than Ange Postecoglou was, though. It was like a game of basketball at times. Now, I do appreciate, obviously, Rodgers does want to play an open attacking style. However, I still don't think he'll have his fullbacks in the pitch and everybody pushed up the pitch, and it turns into a game of basketball. I don't think it'll be like that under Rodgers. I really don't.
So you're saying, Rory, there's radical change under Rodgers. What specifically has he changed, and is he changing, and what's not quite coming off?
Well, for example, a lot of people talk about Kyogo, how high he holds his line normally. He actually stands offside the majority of the time. And he actually got his goal against Aberdeen like that through a mistake from Nicky Devlin. However, what a lot of people are noticing is Brendan Rodgers wants him to be more involved in the game. So he's then coming into the midfield areas at times, trying to collect the ball, pop it off, get it wide. Obviously, your fullbacks are more orthodox fullbacks in terms of keeping their width a little bit more, playing as fullbacks rather than coming into central midfield areas. So when you've been used to playing a specific way for a couple of years under a manager and you've been successful, I can imagine as a player it's very difficult to get your head around A, why you would change that, and B, trying to get used to playing like that again. However, Brendan Rodgers can't come in and just copy Ange Postecoglou's style because he was successful, because you may as well just appoint anyone and say play the same way as Ange Postecoglou did. He's a good coach and his methods work. It's been proven that they work, especially in Scotland. So he'll persevere with that. But specifically what I would say is that the rotations in the middle of the pitch are different. Callum McGregor looks isolated at times for me. And Kyogo's position in terms of getting involved in the game, Brendan Rodgers tried to get him to do that. I've seen balls flash across the face of goal, which Kyogo would have tapped home last season and probably had about 3 or 4 more goals by now. So it's just adapting to that way. I think tactically people underestimate as well. I think there's a view of other football players, they should be able to play, should be able to go out and play. People underestimate the work that goes into a change of formation, a change of style, a change of play. It doesn't happen overnight. Oh, he's had 6 weeks pre-season. Yeah, he's had 6 weeks pre-season, but he's also had players coming in at different times throughout that stage of the season. He's also got to work on fitness, and he's also got to get his message across, and players have got to play enough games to get comfortable with it. So there's so many things there that contribute towards potentially a slow start for Celtic that people, I think, just assume because they're football players they can go out on the pitch and play any formation, and it doesn't work like that. Players have all got different attributes. You need a lot of game intelligence to be able to play different positions and do it well defensively, especially in Europe. And I think it's just taking a little bit of time for Brendan Rodgers to get his message across and for his players to understand it. But I think it will click eventually because he's got too good a track record, Brendan Rodgers, for it not to work.
Well, with that in mind, Rory, let's spool forward to the weekend's Premiership matches. And given what you've just said there, and also Rangers' kind of difficult start to the season, is this game on Sunday at Ibrox maybe the most kind of unpredictable Old Firm game for a good while?
Yeah, I would say so. I think last year the games took care of themselves when they mattered in terms of Celtic doing what they needed to do. Some unbelievable displays at times and then scrapping out a draw at Ibrox. The 3-0 win for Rangers at Ibrox is neither here nor there. I don't think, and I said it at the time, I don't think Ange Postecoglou's thought process was, or the thing that was at top of his agenda was to win that day. I think it was to look at his fringe players because he'd already won the league. Of course, you want to win every Old Firm, but if he wanted to win that day, and that was his absolute goal, and Kyogo and Taylor, etc., would have started. You fast forward to this season, they've had a slow start. Brendan Rodgers is finding things a little bit tricky to navigate at the moment, based on all the reasons I've just touched on. Rangers look a little bit dishevelled at times, lack of ideas, lack of creativity, lack of quality at times. So I would agree with you that it's hard to predict, very much so. Just think, I don't know if we'll see as poor a Celtic performance as we've seen over the last couple of weeks.
All right, can you call it?
You're going to get criticised for sitting on the fence. It is hard to call. If it was at Celtic Park, I would be saying Celtic would win the match. I would say so. I think that both teams will score, and I think Celtic may just edge it by a goal.
Some other intriguing games this weekend. There always is, after all, in the Scottish Premiership. Aberdeen Hibs, two teams starting the season, and well, Hibs in very poor form. Aberdeen still looking for their first league win.
Yes, they are. I think with the game being at Pittodrie, I think I've seen enough from Aberdeen to say, if Hibs had the week off and no game and no travelling, then I would probably say that they would have a better chance. But I've seen enough from Aberdeen, I think, over the two legs, despite the defeat, to say that they'll cause Hibs a lot of problems. Hibs are very, very leaky at the back. Away from the Aston Villa game, and they've conceded 3 goals at home in the league against St Mirren and Livingston. Hibs would be expected to win these games to achieve the goals and aspirations that they would like to achieve. So I don't see a situation where Aberdeen don't score at least one. Hibs may grab one themselves because they've got players who can do that, and Boyle and Ewan. However, it's almost like they're expecting and waiting for those two players to do something to get everyone else out of jail. Joe Newell, that's maybe a bit unfair on him. He's very good as well, can make things happen. But I think Aberdeen will have a little bit too much for Hibs, and I think they will come out victors in that game.
All right, we've got Hearts at the end of a really, really difficult week for them. They've got another difficult game against an unbeaten Motherwell.
My friend actually asked me the other day, as a football player, is it difficult to play Thursday, Sunday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever it may be, Wednesday, Saturday, sorry. And I'll always say, probably not at this time of season from a physical point of view, but travelling takes it out of you. It really does. Now, even yourself, David, and anyone else who's been on holiday, 4.5 hour flight, you get in the hotel, you're knackered. So incorporating a 90-minute game of football in there, in a hostile environment, running around in the heat, to then travel however long a flight to Greece is, 4.5 hours back, to then try and get some sleep at the right times, eat the right things, do a little bit of training, then go into another game. It's the travelling for me that takes out the players, or not players, human beings. So Hearts, I think they'll find it difficult at the weekend, but I don't know if they'll get beat. So I think that's a difficult one to call, and Motherwell have difficulties with injuries in the top end of the pitch. So I think a low-scoring draw would probably be the outcome, 0-0, 1-1, that type of thing for me in that one.
So that's Sunday's games. Tomorrow, what's the story, Rory? Tomorrow, Livy St Mirren's. St Mirren could go top. Kelly Ross County, St Johnstone, Dundee. What's the story going to be? The big story tomorrow night.
I'm looking forward. I'm covering the game down at Rugby Park again last week. I think everyone was intrigued with Kilmarnock's start to the season, playing Rangers, Hearts and Celtic. I think everyone was intrigued to see how they set up and played against a team of a similar calibre who will have similar ambitions. They just missed out in the last minute. I think it was a game of two halves. So I'll be interested to see tomorrow how that one goes. I think Ross County have got a good side this year. I really do. And I expect to see a lot of quality. I covered the game a few months ago, and it was a relegation scrap. The loser of that game effectively went into the playoffs. And I think there's a different mindset in Dingwall and Kilmarnock this year. So really looking forward to that one. Difficult to pinpoint exactly who'll win the match, but I expect to see two confident and different sides playing from the two sides I watched not so long ago. As for Livingston, they play, sorry, remind me, David.
Simon.
It's two managers who have done very well at their clubs and have built up over a number of years a particular style, a particular way of playing. I think Stephen Robinson, and I spoke to Stephen Robinson at the start of the season, he played 3-5-2 last year, and he felt games against the likes of Livingston and Motherwell and Kilmarnock, they matched them up and it became a bit of a slog and it took any real quality away from the match and it was almost a bit of a lottery. He's changed to a 3-4-3 this year and it's obviously been successful. Livingston had a fantastic result at Easter Road. Again, it's so difficult to call these matches, but these are the type of matches, if you want to be the outlier in terms of finishing in sixth spot, now that's assuming that Hibs pick up form, and because I do expect Aberdeen and Hearts to be in the top six. Hibs is a bit of a question mark at the moment. If you want to be that one that bucks the trend and catches that sixth spot or possibly fifth, then you need to win matches like this and you need to go to these places and win. I think Stephen Robinson, just with the confidence in the squad, I know he's got that horrible manager of the month that leads to a defeat in your next match, but I don't think it will. And I think that St Mirren may just sneak that one.
All right, better get a word on from you on St Johnstone Dundee. I will be getting complaints.
Yes, my former club Dundee. Fantastic result against Hearts. Got their season going with 3 points. You know, they're sitting with 4 points on the board out of 9. I think that's a really solid start. He'll be wanting to, even at this stage of the season, he'll be looking at St Johnstone with 1 point and going, well, if we can beat them at the weekend, that gives a 6 point gap. And I always say it doesn't matter how you do it in your first season. Finish 10th by the skin of your teeth on the last day, not having played particularly well all season. That is enough in your first season in a new league when you've been promoted. Survival, build from there. Look at Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock will have a good year this year, and it was all based on the fact that they managed to stay in the league last year, get a feel for it, get a squad together that can compete, and then add to it. So I think Tony Docherty will be going there. I don't think he'll have any interest in getting a point. I think he'll want all 3. Stephen McLean has to then deal with the fact that, yes, great performance at Celtic Park, no real pressure on them to go and win the match because they're not expected to or even get anything from it. He's now got the pressure of going, right, you're expected to win this match in front of your home supporters. So how does he then approach that? The gaps open up at the back, which has been their downfall so far, mistakes and things. I think Dundee will win the game, and I think they'll win it by 1-0. All
right, we'll be a bit of a wrap up there, but before we do, transfer window closes tonight. Past my bedtime for that, but can you just tell me what you think so far to press? What is the best bit of business you think in the Premiership?
The best bit of business, in my opinion, is I think getting Kyogo on a 4-year contract this summer. Given his performances last year and how good he was, I think he's an unbelievable talent, an unbelievable player. And if he's at Celtic for the next 4 years, like his contract suggests, then I think he'll go down as a club legend. So I think, given his season last year, given the manager moved on and the manager that signed him, he was very close to, given their roots and things like that, and the fact that he'd managed over in Japan, I think if Rodgers can get the best out of Kyogo, that'll make Celtic a force because he scores so many goals and he's so intelligent. And I personally think the best bit of business is getting Kyogo on a 4-year deal.
All right, Rory, thank you so much. We'll leave it there. Plenty more football across the weekend and beyond in BBC Scotland. Off the Ball and Sportsline for starters tomorrow. Sports Scene as well. I'll see you with the result show at 4:30 on BBC One. Get the plug in there. Hope you can join me. Thanks so much for listening.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.